Yes. That's not a yes. Yeah. That must be an amendment. Yeah. Still don't know what's going on. Just follow everybody else.
Put their hand up.
How did it go? I don't know.
Send it back.
Return to sender.
Yeah, return to sender.
bringing us safely to this place and calling us to the service of this community. For wisdom, for guidance, and for courage to do the right for the good of all entrusted to our collective care. Let us pray. Grant to us, Lord God, a vision of this land as your love would make it, a land where the weak are protected and none go hungry or poor, a land where the benefits of our communal life are shared and everyone can enjoy them, a land where all live together in tolerance and mutual respect, a land where peace is built with justice and justice is guided by your love, and give us the inspiration and the courage to build such a society. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good evening and welcome everyone to the council meeting. I request attendees to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect in memory of former councillor and Mayor Heather Buckpitt, who sadly passed away on the 28th of April 2023, and former councillor Richard Haddock, who sadly passed away on the 25th of June 2023. Our thoughts are with their friends and families. Please be seated. The purpose of this meeting is to deal with a number of major issues for the well-being of Torbay and the best interest of the community. My role as Civic Mayor is to ensure that today's agenda is dealt with effectively and to allow fairness throughout the discussions. As you are aware, the meeting is governed by strict procedures and standing orders. To make sure the meeting is run fairly, I expect healthy discussion and respectful speeches by councillors. I will not allow repetition. I will also not allow any barracking or talking across the chamber, which was experienced in the last meeting. If this does happen, I will not hesitate to use standing orders to remove councillors from the meeting. If members wish to make a point of order or personal explanation, I will consider on a case-by-case basis when I take these. Although standing orders allow individuals to be seated during their speeches, I would prefer, if whenever possible, councillors to stand when addressing the council so that you can be clearly seen and heard. When speaking, please ensure your microphone is turned on. If members wish to leave the meeting before it is finished, please follow Standing Order A25.7 and give your apologies before you leave via the Head of Governance Support. Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our in public meetings. The proceedings of the Council meeting will also be recorded. Please can attendees refrain from watching live stream as this will cause interference for our viewers. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear a recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave by the nearest exit. The Riviera Centre staff will assist you. Once outside, please assemble in front of the tennis courts to the seaward side of the building. Please also ensure that all mobile phones, iPads are turned to silent. I will call a break if the meeting is going beyond 7 p.m. Apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
Mr Mayor, we have apologies for absence from the following councillors: Nicolau, Pentney, Law and Tolchard.
I propose that the minutes of the annual council meeting and adjourned annual council meeting held on the 16th and 25th of May 2023 be signed as the correct record. Is there a seconder?
I will second that, Mr Mayor.
I will now take the vote. All those in favour? Against? No, unanimous. Have members any non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interests in any of the matters on today's agenda?
Yes.
Councillor Harvey?
Yes. Sorry. Pecuniary interest on item 8, section 1.
Thank you. Officers? Would members please ensure that they also declare their interest before the relevant item is discussed and complete the interest form which the Head of Governance Support has given you. Have officers any personal interests in any matters on today's agenda? No. I am pleased to introduce the first Public Service Recognition Award for those councillors who did not stand or were not re-elected at May's elections. This evening, I will be presenting a framed picture to thank those who gave their time and incredible dedication to serve the community of Torbay. Would the Director of Corporate Services and Head of Governance Support join me in presentations?
Thanks. The late Councillor Jane Barnaby and her husband Richard Barnaby will be collecting this award on her behalf, as well as the long service certificate.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Former Councillor Anne Brooks.
Lovely. Oh, that's interesting. That's good because I've got one talkie. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Former Councillor Cecilia Brown.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. There you go.
Oh, how lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Former Councillor Ray Hill.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
There you go.
Gosh,
A fine
Thank you.
picture.
it's a very
Thank
fine
you.
picture. Thanks.
Thank you.
Former Councillor Lee Howgate.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you. There you go.
Cheers, thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Former Councillor John Kavanagh.
There you go. Picture of you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Former Councillor Robert Loxton.
It's a long walk up.
It is, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you.
Former Councillor Mike Morey.
Oh, that's brilliant. I was worried it's going to be a picture of Jackie Stockman. That's fine.
Congratulations.
All right.
And lastly for this evening, former councillor Lynn Sykes.
Thank you. I thought it was a picture of me. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. I would like to welcome Gavin Ellis of Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue to present a public service award to Councillor David Thomas for his service in the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority. Would Mr. Ellis please come forward to make this presentation? Councillor Thomas, would you like to make your way up, please? Would you like to come up?
Councillors, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. I'm Gavin Ellis, the Chief Fire Officer for Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. We present this picture of a thatch fire in the tradition of the Fire and Rescue Service to councillors that have served in the Fire and Rescue Authority on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Authority, the Fire Service and the communities of Devon and Somerset. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got a long meeting, but I'd just say thank you very much. For me, it's all about partnership working across Torbay and across the wider Devon. Been absolutely delighted to spend, I think it was 8 or 9 years with the Fire Authority and understanding how they work and how we can work together. Because moving forward over the next 4 years, you know, our administration is all about what we can do in partnership and how we can give a better bang for our buck for our residents working together. Thank you.
Has the Leader of the Council any announcements that he wishes to make?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
In the absence of the Chief Executive, as the Director of Corporate Services, any announcements that he wishes to make on her behalf?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Council is on a significant improvement journey, and it was amazing for this to be recognised by local government peers at the recent Local Government Chronicle Awards, where the Council won Most Improved Council Award. The Chief Executive has asked me to present the award to the Council meeting this evening and read the following announcement. Our submission detailed the improvements that we are making across the entirety of the council. The judges said that it was a fine example of whole organisation improvement, evidenced with financial grip and the humility to recognise the need to continue this impressive improvement trajectory. It was a privilege to celebrate on the evening with colleagues from each directorate across the council and to celebrate with all colleagues since. The award is small in size, but it is significant in stature. It recognises the hard work of all colleagues to date and gives the confidence that we will continue to improve the council and the services we provide to residents. Mr. Mayor, please can I now invite each of the group leaders to say a few words in respect of this achievement.
I call Councillor David Thomas, Councillor Steve Darling and Councillor Darren Cowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was delighted to see our officers' hard work recognised by the Local Government Chronicle Awards. The judges at the awards came from other local authorities, including last year's winner of our award, the Most Improved Council. Having their peers endorse the progress made particularly pertinent as they face similar challenges and have seen the worth of Torbay Council's holistic approach to improvement. Our officers know there is still much more work to be done, and this award is an excellent boost to morale as they continue to drive for efficiency and effective outcomes for our residents and visitors. I offer my congratulations to the many staff behind this success and commend their approach to continuous improvement. This has been a massive boost for our staff and the council, and it has enabled us to start to create a one-team approach. And I am confident that this will be the start of a trophy cabinet that will even rival our local football club. And in just a moment, as we go to collect the LGC award, I'm absolutely delighted that Councillor Darling and Councillor Cowell will be joining me in just a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to celebrate this massive win for Torbay Council and our communities across Torbay and our partners. I think we do not need to reflect too hard back into history as to when Torbay was seen as a basket case and was on a watch list of councils that could fall over sideways and fail because of their non-financial viability. In fact, it wasn't only about 6 years ago that maybe not this council chamber, but this local authority voted to give back to start exploring giving back the powers of unitary authority status to Devon County. So the fact that we've been able to turn this round over the previous 4 years is a testament. The partnership that ran the local authority between the Independents and the Liberal Democrats coalesced around turning the tide on poverty. And a key element of that was around children's services, but I'll come to that in a moment. Part of our world was trying to make sure that we were rebuilding the bridges that had been broken previously with key partners, and actually making sure that we were putting communities as front and centre of how we tried to tackle our challenges in Torbay. Children's services was a #1 priority for us as a partnership administration, and we managed to get most of the local authority on board with that agenda. I think it's testimony to the changes that we've seen is that last year at the Local Government Association conference in Harrogate, Cordelia Law did a seminar in the innovation zone of how we turned around Torbay Children's Services. But it just isn't about children's services. It's also about driving that culture change and making sure that we've got the right officers appointed in post to drive that change that we all thirst for. It's also about culture and making sure that we've got that culture of change and inclusion that we saw develop over the previous 4 years. So we need to thank our officers. We need to thank colleagues from throughout the chamber of councillors who helped drive this change. But we also need to make sure that we thank our partners in Torbay, because the reality is, as a relatively small unitary authority, it's how we work with others can drive change massively. So we shouldn't be insular and only inward looking. We need to be embracing others and getting them on this agenda. The reality is that this award demonstrates that there is a golden opportunity for the new administration to build upon, and I wish you luck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to colleagues and council staff from across the organisation and all our partners for the tremendous work that this award is testimony to. When the Partnership Administration was formed in 2019, it set the tone of the commitment to drive forward change in the way the council operates. We were determined to ensure our staff felt valued and that our communities were empowered. This award is a reflection of the significant progress that has been made in the past 4 years, despite negotiating the pandemic, and provides the encouragement for all at Torbay Council and beyond to continue that improvement journey. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, councillors. Would the group leaders please come forward for photos with the award?
So, if you want to go just a step forward a little bit, Mark, sure. And this is Deputy Mayor. I think we can probably then gather around it. Is that all right there? Okay. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Has the Overview and Scrutiny Coordinator any announcements he wishes to make? Councillor Billings.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I would like to vary the order of business on today's agenda to enable item 7 on the agenda, members' questions, to be considered after item 9, consultation amendments. The Council has received 2 petitions for noting. Please see pages 16 and 17. A petition has been received requesting that the grass tennis courts at Oldway be retained as an enclosed dog exercise area. It's approximately 213 signatures. The second petition seeks to make Brixham Road safer at the junction with Roselands Drive. The petitioners for both these petitions have requested that they are submitted direct to the decision maker. They will both be considered by the Director of Pride in Place in Constitution with the Cabinet Member for Place Services and Economic Growth. I move to item 8, budget monitoring. Outturn 2020.
Councillor, sorry, Mayor, I just closed pecuniary interest, so I will leave now for this item.
That's okay, thank you. I move to item 8, budget monitoring. Outturn 2022-2023. Please refer to page 28. Can Councillor Tyman please put the Cabinet's motion to the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At its meeting held on the 11th of July, the Cabinet considered the Council's outturn report for the year 2022-23, along with recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, who had also previously considered the report. The Cabinet concluded their consideration by making the following recommendations to Council. That Council notes the revenue outturn position and approves A, the transfer of the 0.4 million carry forward into earmarked capital reserves, and B, the addition of the Tor Valley North project to the current capital programme. Members will have noted that the outturn report shows significant overspend on a number of services, namely 1.9 million in children's services, 0.8 million in adult services, 0.7 million in corporate services, and 0.9 million in the Police Directorate. Details of these are contained within the report and were considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Board and by Cabinet. Parts of these overspend were undoubtedly as a result of inflationary pressures, which could not have been predicted when the budget was set in early 2022. But other parts have resulted from rising demand for services. Members might wish to note that many of these cost pressures are also evident in the early months of this financial year, and there will be a need to carefully review financial projections that will be in the first monitoring report due to be published shortly. This week's news that inflation is falling is most welcome, but rising interest rates have and will continue to make things difficult for many of our residents. This rise in interest rates last year, however, was significantly above expectations, and together with contributions from pooled business rates and additional funding receipts, has allowed the Council to offset that overspend, and the Council is reporting a 0.4 million surplus for last year. Our Financial Director pointed out to members only yesterday that there are far too many projects in the capital programme, some of which have also got significant viability issues. Your Cabinet endorsed that view, and a comprehensive review of the capital programme is underway. This will without doubt, lead to the need to make some preliminary development costs to be written off, and this report recommends that the surplus be transferred to an earmarked capital reserve to absorb at least some of that write-off cost. Finally, we're delighted to be able to recommend that the Tor Valley North project be added to the capital programme. This will be a welcome and much-needed enhancement of sporting facilities in Torbay, and I understand is due to be primarily funded from 106 contributions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tyman. Councillor Tyman, do you have a seconder?
He does indeed. It is me. Unfortunately, I will, well, not unfortunately, I will reserve my right and probably speak later, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I now invite debate on the amendment. On the motion. Councillor Steve Darling.
Thank you for being slightly preemptive just then, Mr. Mayor. I therefore wish to propose an amendment that has been shared at the beginning of this meeting with all colleagues around this room. Essentially, it is highlighting where we know there are pressures already building within our budget. And I know, Mr. Mayor, from many residents, the cost of living crisis is here and and is massively impacting on many local residents. And our amendment that we've shared looks to address that immediately rather than putting this money away for a rainy day as the administration proposes. I'm afraid, colleagues, for many people in our community, it is already raining cats and dogs. As you will see in these proposals, we have been alerted as the opposition that our discretionary housing benefit monies is already 40% allocated, with only up to quarter one so far in the year. Now, for the uninitiated, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to highlight to colleagues that this is an opportunity of supporting people in their accommodation where they are at the moment, so they're less likely to become homeless and therefore add to add to the disruption of their own personal lives, but also the cost of the local to the local authority. So this is very much a stitch in time saves nine money for us as a local authority. I think it's also, Mr. Chairman, very important, Mr. Mayor, very important to bear in mind that the government failed to support us adequately enough for temporary accommodation. We have £1 million gap already for this budget, and we have to fill that from local taxpayers' money. And if we fail to address this, we'll be even stoking this this pressure on our budgets even higher than it is already, Mr. Mayor. So I would encourage us to allocate 150,000 of this money to that area that we know is highly pressured, and then a further £50,000 for the Food Alliance. And not being dictatorial around this, I think that we should, the recommendation here before us suggests that it should be allocated to them to choose how to best apply it during the coming financial year. Because whilst we know that there is some liquidity in their spending at the moment, we know, as Councillor Tyman alluded to, interest rates are increasing massively. And what scares me massively, Mr. Mayor, is that when we look at communities like that in Tomoan Ward and in Rounded with Hyde, over 50% of those people rent, and an awful lot of those are rent-to-buy properties, and I'm afraid the finances no longer work on an interest-only mortgage. So we declared, and it was a cross-chamber thing a couple of years ago, a housing crisis, and it is far from over, and we need to support those in need in our communities now rather than leaving it to the future, because the fact of the matter is, Mr. Mayor, that unless we give officers the confidence that they can support those people in need, we may end up not supporting them anywhere near enough, and we end up having higher bills and more disruption for people's lives than one would normally expect to see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Darling. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I rise to second this. And I'm referred to the Torbay's Joint Strategic Needs Assessment of 22-23, where it says over 32% of residents in Torbay live in income deprivation, and 62 out of 100 people are not meeting their 5-a-day fruit and veg requirements, and not through choice. The demand for food banks is high. In fact, the demand for food support referrals to food banks has increased by over 29%, and this excludes the affordable food clubs and the social supermarkets. The increase of mortgages and rental costs, and also the food prices increasing, is resulting in a cost of living crisis, and the need for support is only going to increase. So I fully support this amendment and urge you to support this too.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I now move to debate. I now invite debate on the amendment. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And before I forget, I would like to request a recorded vote on the amendment, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I've risen to support the amendment, not surprisingly, and we heard how the discretionary housing payment is overheating and overspending this year. And the flip side of that is if people can't stay in their accommodation, is that this council has to spend huge amounts of money on temporary accommodation. And I think we've heard that the council is spending in the region of £6 million on temporary accommodation when things go wrong. And this will continue to happen for as long as we do not have enough affordable and particularly social housing in Torbay. And I very much hope that the new administration will continue the focus on affordable housing as the previous administration, because until we solve that side of the coin, we won't solve the increased costs of people losing their private rented homes and the temporary accommodation costs that will fall to this council to spend. So we know that these increased costs are coming down the line, so we might as well put money into it now to try and stem that tide. So I would urge colleagues to across the chamber to support this amendment, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dear fellow councillors, I'm an accountant. I fully appreciate the need for financial prudence. If I heard that word once, I've heard it 200,000 times in my professional career. Particularly in economic uncertainty times, cost of living we call it at the moment, call it what you like. We know what we're talking about. It affects this council, every organisation, and individual. And I fully understand from an accountant's point of view why capital reserves are being suggested as the recipient. A well-run budget suggests a well-run council. Most improved council of the year says a lot. And as was referred to earlier, our Section 151 officer yesterday did indeed enlighten us. He certainly enlightened me on our likely future situation. And yes, a cause for serious thought, indeed. Yet, to paraphrase him, this does not mean we do nothing. It means we need to think in new ways, repackage, prioritise, which reflects my next comment. The council does not exist to maintain good financial management. Good financial management exists to better support us to deliver relevantly and timely services to those, excuse me, dog on move. Yes, thank you. Good financial management exists to better support.
Councillor Penny, I think we're to lack of relevance now for the amendment.
All right. All right. Why am I mentioning all this now? Because we are stashing away £400,000 into our deep pockets. That's how they will see it. The council don't understand us. They're lining their own pockets, but not ours. And this 400,000 is a welcome windfall. We weren't expecting it. Isn't that nice? Lovely. Lucky us. But why should we keep all the luck? Why not share it a little with those in need? 150,000 discretionary housing, 50,000 food allowance will not materially affect our financial position. And after all, even in this proposal, £200,000 will still add to capital reserves. And so we show our concern to deliver just a little more to those in genuine need now, and we can do that now if we so choose. And we do so by balancing financial prudence on the one hand, social prudence on the other. They do not need to be clashing, they are in balance. Yes, it can slip this way and that way as the winds blow. Totally agree. I see and I understand the need for both types of prudence. And these, dear fellow councillors, are the reasons, and Mr. Mayor, where I commend this amendment to your kind consideration and agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Manley Darling.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I always do like opening the meeting with a prayer. And today's prayer was very poignant, I felt, because it said we must support the weak and help the poor. And in Tormowen is one of the most deprived wards in the southwest. We have people, lots and lots of people sleeping rough, and people who find it very difficult getting hand to mouth. And I think that this amendment is a way of supporting the people in our bay. I was talking very recently to some of the food banks, the food larders, and they were explaining to me how great the demand is going up there. And they were also saying how concerned they are that the council will not be supporting these going forward. And I think, again, this amendment to transfer or move this spending would be much appreciated. And I feel that really we shouldn't be turning our backs on our local communities that are really struggling at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley-Darling. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I don't see how we can possibly accept the amendment before us this evening. Councillor Penny seriously understands finances. He talks about good financial management exists. Well, in my world, to achieve good financial management, you need to work at good financial management. It just doesn't exist on its own. We are committed to having a strong grip on finance. And certainly from somebody who understands figures, you'll understand the revenue side of the equation is only ever half of the equation. Or let's put it this way, on a good day, the revenue side is half and the capital is the other side. We've got some questions coming up a little bit later on, which I think will kind of open up a little bit more about that capital expenditure problem. £10 million hole here, £30 million hole here, £12 million somewhere else, and another £12 million required somewhere else. So that capital hole is absolutely massive. This £400,000, Councillor Darling says that this decision affects us stops us helping people with payments to housing payments. It doesn't. It absolutely does not. Our proposal doesn't. It doesn't mean we're allocating the money to somewhere else. It says that we are putting it into a reserve. Why we're putting it into a reserve? There are a number of schemes that you'll be well aware of that we have only just started to uncover. One of them, particularly in Tormowen, actually, that has got more than £200,000 actually spent on the scheme, but unfortunately, it's not going to come forward. Now, that is going to have to be written off. Now, I would say to you, Councillor Penny, that that is not good financial management. If you spent £200,000 of somebody else's money out of their deep pockets, whoever's got these deep pockets, but if you spent that £200,000 and actually it's not going to deliver anything, diddly squat, nothing, but you're going to have to take some money from a windfall, from an increase in the interest rates to try to bridge that particular gap. Well, whatever happens, we still have to bridge that gap, whether it comes from this piece of money or whether it comes through in the budget round. And in reality, just because we're proposing to put it into that capital pot at the moment, absolutely doesn't mean that we're not supporting Housing Payments Fund. It doesn't mean that we're not supporting the Food Alliance. Absolutely not. We have got those options. We can continue to support, and we still have the money if we need to and if we want to. So the money is not being squirreled away into somebody's deep pocket, whoever that is, I really don't know. But I would absolutely urge the members on this side of the room this evening to vote the amendment down, and then we can go on to talk about the motion that we actually laid before this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think that speech was testimony to the approach and the different approach from the two sides of this chamber here in Torbay, because the amendment is about social impact. It's about helping those in most need in Torbay, and I didn't hear any words about social responsibility or socio-economic benefit. It was all about capital and pound signs, and that is a clear defining difference between both sides of this chamber. And of course, one of the reasons we've got such an impact on the capital programme is because of the combined impact of the pandemic and delays caused by that, the war in Ukraine, and of course 40-odd days of mad trustonomics that's impacted our interest rates that are pushing some of those projects beyond viability. What we need to be doing is seeking ways to ensure we get those projects over the line, because 4 years ago, the government recognised that they were appropriate projects to be funded to improve and stimulate Torbay's economic regeneration. And what we've got to remember is that the housing crisis we've got in Torbay, that is impacting on so many families. And somebody referred to the buy-to-let, the number of families that are being pushed out of their homes because the landlords are having to sell up because they can no longer cover the cost of interest-only mortgages. That is a time bomb that is actually beginning to explode today. So we need to be making sure that we're supporting those families and those children, making sure that we don't end up putting a pressure on our other services, such as children's services in particular, that we could end up finding that the cost of temporary accommodation for putting kids in care far outweighs the cost of the £200,000, £400,000 to go into a capital reserve. Yes, I understand the logic of it. That's why I can support this Liberal Democrat amendment, because of the £200,000 that is prudently being put away. And indeed, it would cover the cost of the abortive announcement of the investment in the old toll house. That's assuming that it actually sells. So I'm more than happy to support this amendment. I'm so disappointed at the wall of silence and the lack of participation from members opposite, because I know many of you will actually may well be thinking slightly differently, and that this is a compromise. So vote with your conscience. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Bye.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm certainly not going to be silenced, and I'm certainly going to speak in my conscience, with my conscience. And I have to tell you, you couldn't really make this up. These are amendments. This amendment is basically admitting we haven't put enough money in the budget for certain things that we now want to spend money on. But who put the 2023-2024 budget together? This administration is actually working through your budget. The people opposite are the people that put the budget together. So making pretty speeches in opposition that there isn't enough money for certain things that you'd like to find more money for now seems to me a bit weak. When you were in charge of the purse strings and you put the budget together, which went through in March. So that is point number one. Point number two, you help the weak and you help the poor by having a strong council. Absolutely well done indeed to get the LGC award for the most improved council, and we work cross-party on children's services. I think the support for those through the community through the pandemic was very well deserved, as well as the progress in children's services. But we certainly didn't get that LGC award for delivery on regeneration or delivery on housing, including affordable housing. Absolutely not. So now to hear little pretty speeches about the need for affordable housing when delivery over the last few years has been absolutely pitiful rings very, very hollow indeed to me. So what we need the money for, and it will be very clear to members of the community over the next few years, the next few months, is that sadly there's been a lot of talk and no action on regeneration and housing projects. Great expense has been incurred in the planning and processing and talking stage. Sadly, we know that out of nearly 100 projects, The great majority of those have been found to be unviable. People must have known that they were unviable, but willingly committing more and more money, so that the grip in finance that people up the line seem to think that we have is, sadly, if only that were true. So absolutely, we will need the £400,000 to go into the earmarked capital reserves to clear up the mess on the capital project that you have left this administration. You need a strong, financially strong council to serve the weak, the poor and everyone, and turn the tide on the economic decline that you have left us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Right to reply, Councillor Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know you're really good at panto, Councillor Bye, but that was a stellar performance then that, that would really go down well down at the Princess Theatre. That was just complete fantasy world as far as the challenges that we face. Colleagues, the reality is that as the world moves on, you see where the challenges are and you alter your way that you're dealing with matters. You can't just set your vehicle down the road and not alter the steering wheel on it. And this is a bit of an alteration to it, because we know, because of the pressures that authorities have faced up and down the country, and it is shameful that colleagues are pretending that this is a challenge peculiar to Torbay, is it's a challenge faced up and down the country that many local authorities faced, and equally many projects faced, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that if you look at issues like Crossrail and many other capital projects throughout the country, we've seen eye-watering increases in those projects, and that is something that has to be faced wherever you are. Colleagues, Councillor Cow was very right that this is actually whether you're here to support those most in need in our communities, which is something that gets me out of bed. After all, the partnership between the Independents and the Liberal Democrats was around turning the tide on poverty, and we need to give comfort to our officers that they can support people because we put some extra money in our pockets. I didn't pick this figure from the air. I had a conversation with one of our directors. I was going to put a lower figure in there. So either we put the money in now, or come the end of the financial year, we're going to have to find it from somewhere else in the budget, or officers will be instructed by your cabinet to turn the taps off and let people to go to hell in a handcart. And I don't trust the cabinet, colleagues. So please vote this through to give officers confidence that they can spend and support those most in need as we face a massive crisis in Torbay. Colleagues, don't turn your backs on those in housing need in Torbay and support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Darling. Councillor Timon, right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased that the colleague on my right, Councillor Bye, said what he said. I have to say, up till this moment, I've been somewhat reluctant to pitch in and perhaps complain about what I think has been a very poor level of financial management in the last 4 years. But if you take what I said at the beginning, when I proposed this motion, there was massive overspend across most of the council, and frankly, it was a matter of luck for the opposition that there was such a big surplus made by the finance division that offset that and created this in the first place. I can say, from what I'm picking up, from what I'm being told by colleagues, from what I'm being told by officers, that the financial situation for the current year that we have inherited is really quite worrying. I think, fortunately, we will make quite a lot of money, more than we expected, from Treasury again, and that will go hopefully some way to offset it. It is going to be a very difficult balance this year between supporting our community, supporting our residents. And I'm well aware, absolutely aware, of the problems that many people are having. I'm absolutely aware of the sense of actually helping people stay in their own homes, whether they be rented or owned, rather than becoming homeless and us having to pick up the responsibility, the very expensive result in having to house them. Yeah, I realise we are going to have to give more support during this year, but I really do not think I want to commit to how that is at this stage until officers have had a really good opportunity to come back to us and tell us what is needed, how that's needed, and when it's needed. I'm convinced it will be needed. In the meantime, the capital write-offs, the money we're talking about is a mere fraction of what I think is going to be needed. I think it's going to be very significant. I hope it won't be. But again, capital projects are being appraised at the moment. I am conscious that we will need to monitor this carefully going forward. I'm not unsympathetic to the arguments being put forward that our residents need that help. But what we do know is that 400,000 will be insufficient for the write-off. And we know that's needed, and I still believe that that is the prudent way of acting at this moment in time. I therefore ask my colleagues to reject this amendment and trust us to monitor and react in the right way as is needed going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. I now move to the recorded vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm now going to carry out a recorded vote on the amendment to item 8 as circulated. I'll be calling out councillors' names in alphabetical order. When you hear your name, please indicate whether you're voting for, against or abstaining. Please remember to turn your microphone on, and there is no need to stand. Councillor Emile.
For.
Councillor Atia Allah.
For.
Councillor Billings.
Against.
Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Bryant.
Against.
Councillor Bye.
Against.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Cowell.
For.
Councillor George Darling.
For.
Councillor Mandy Darling.
For.
Councillor Steve Darling.
For.
Councillor Douglas Dunbar.
For.
Councillor Fellows.
Against.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Hutchings.
Against.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Joyce.
Against.
Councillor Barbara Lewis. Against. Councillor Chris Lewis.
Against.
Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor Madison.
Against.
Councillor Penny.
For.
Councillor Spagania.
Against.
Councillor Stevens.
Against.
Councillor Strang.
Against.
Councillor David Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Jacqueline Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Tranter.
Against.
Councillor Twelves.
Against.
Councillor Tyerman. And Councillor Verdi.
For.
Thank you. Just take a moment now to count the votes. We now counted the votes on that recorded vote on Amendment 8. There were 13 votes for the amendment, 18 votes against the amendment, and 5 councillors absent. Therefore, the amendment has been lost, Mr. Mayor.
I now move to invite debate on the original motion. Councillor Chris Lewis.
I think all has been said, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Timon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that you won't want me to wade into the opposition once again and to tell them a few home truths about the financial management. I think all has been said. I will leave it where it is, and I ask colleagues to support this motion.
And I move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Motion carried. I now move to item 9, Constitution Amendments. Please refer to page 41. Can Councillor Timon please put his motion to the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry you've got me again. The Council's Constitution is an important document which sets out the way Council operates. It is, however, often undergoing change to reflect best practice and the way the Council needs to modify its procedures. Today I'm proposing the Council adopt 4 changes to the Constitution. The first is to determine that a decision should be regarded as a key decision if it is likely to result in compulsory redundancy or change in terms and conditions of employment for 25 or more employees. This level was previously set at 100 employees, and I and my colleagues consider that 25 is a more reasonable number in this regard. The second point is to revert to the position which has served the Council well for many years, where changes to the Constitution could be determined by the monitoring officer in consultation with the group leaders, with the inbuilt safeguard that any of those group leaders could request that the change be debated and determined at a full Council meeting. This allows for some changes that have got the agreement of all the groups in the Council to be processed with ease and at speed, and it still leaves that all more major or controversial changes require the consent of full Council. The third change is to make a number of changes regarding standing orders in relation to Council meetings. The first is that no petitions, members' questions or public questions take place at the annual Council meeting. The second is that it restricts notices of motion to matters which the Council has responsibility for or direct ability to influence. A third is that it updates the Council's petition scheme to reflect circumstances where petitions will not be accepted, so that those coincide for the main part with UK government rules. The fourth change is to change the rules regarding member invites to attend the Local Government Association conference to coincide with the appointments to be on the Local Government Association General Assembly. The motion, therefore, is as follows. The Council approves the following revised Constitution documents as set out in appendices 1 to 4 of this report. Appendix 1, Article 11 on decision making, Appendix 2, Article 13, a review and revision of the Constitution. Appendix 3, standing orders in relation to council meetings. And Appendix 4, local protocol on leader of the council and political group relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timon. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second and reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I now invite a debate. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I rise to table the Liberal Democrat amendment, which has been circulated in advance at the start of the meeting. The Liberal Democrat group have concerns about a couple of the proposals before us this evening. We very much view it as two of the proposals as a power grab by the executive at the expense of certainly backbench councillors, and an attempt to gag councillors from speaking out on issues, particularly if they happen to be a criticism of the government's record. The two particular changes that we're most concerned about include the changes to the Constitution, and under the Partnership Administration, we had in fact only just recently changed this so that changes to the Constitution would come to full council, where they would receive the full glare of a public meeting and would allow all backbench councillors to have their say if they wanted to. Now it's reverting back so that the monitoring officer and group leaders will have their say, which feels very undemocratic and a bit of a power grab. And it's really strange because this change has only just recently happened. So and there's nothing that's happened that has made this change seem to be wrong. And it's not like these days agendas of council meetings are particularly long. Certainly under this administration, they don't appear to have been. So it's not like they'd be taking up time of the meetings. So it's just to try and centralise power in the hands of the group leaders, which is not where it should be and not where, certainly on this side of the council chamber, that we feel comfortable with. And the second item was on council motions, where the proposed change meant that motions would only be about matters for which the council had a direct responsibility or direct ability to influence, was the proposed change, which would rule out all sorts of things which might appear to be national, but which would affect here in Torbay. So examples like sewage entering our seas and rivers, or closures of ticket machines, for example, or many other issues. So we just made a tweak to that so that if there were issues affecting Torbay, even if they were national ones, that we could still have motions discussed. And it's councillors have an important role to speak out on issues which affect our bay, and to lead by example, and to absolutely speak out and champion issues as well. So it's not just, if we're just looking insular and Little Britain or Little Torbay, then we're not really championing our roles properly. So that's the thinking behind our amendment this evening, and I would very much welcome all colleagues, although given that the last one, I imagine the payroll vote will go against it, but I very much welcome colleagues supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second. I can do very little better than to support exactly what my colleague, Councillor Swithin Long, has just said. We do have these concerns. In particular, clearly we do not stand alone as a council. We are subject to the whims and wills of what goes on more generally, internationally, nationally, etc., etc. And so it may seem rather strange, but to include these extra words, or why they were taken out, which affect the borough of Torbay, is actually quite important. I understand that the Constitution may seem rather dry and dull and boring to many people. It isn't. It's absolutely fundamental, and the individual word here and there can make a heck of a difference. Nothing further at this stage, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Penny. I now move to debate on the amendment. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cordelia Law, for health reasons, can't make this evening, and she sent her apologies. She's asked me to read out a statement, so with your forbearance, I will read the statement from Cordelia Law. On the second of the group of changes, when she says, "To me, it appears to be an attack on the democratic voice of the people of Torbay, that you want to change the scope of the notice of motions to remove the sentence," and I quote, "which affect the borough of Torbay," and replace with the words, "matters for which the council has direct ability to influence and or control." This shrinks the emphasis of motions that can be put forward from being about matters which affect the borough of Torbay, i.e. the people of Torbay more broadly, to one that is limited to what the administration, the council, already has responsibility for. To make motions only about what the council already have responsibility for renders this democratic instrument practically meaningless. Local authority motions are very often precisely the vehicle used by councils throughout the country to draw attention to the need for national direction, policy or legislation in a particular area that affects the lives of our residents, but that we can't control. Let me give you an example. Earlier this year, in March, we put forward a motion using a local government association template about vaping and the need for national legislation to make vaping less attractive to children. In doing so, we added our voice and motion to that of multiple councils around the country. Just Google council motion vaping. The result of these motions has been seen on every news channel and media outlet and has led to the publication of a research briefing by the government about the regulation of vaping, or e-cigarettes as it's called in the briefing. This is just one example of a subject for which the council doesn't have a direct ability to influence or control, but which does affect the residents of Torbay. By passing this motion and adding Torbay's voice to the national, and may I add, cross-party voice with this motion, we have played an active role in the democratic process of our country for our residents. We are not elected to be parochial. We are elected to make a positive difference to people's lives, and that sometimes means putting pressure on national government and adding our voice through motions to tackle issues that need national attention and legislation. Why would this administration want to limit that ability? Why would this administration want to gag itself and silence our voice in national democracy? I urge members on both sides of the chamber to defend our democratic voice and reject this amendment to the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to be honest, I sit here this evening thinking I'm almost in a parallel universe. For members of the audience this evening, and indeed anybody watching on YouTube, a lot of this stuff is kind of discussed and debated in that very same leaders group meeting that is just being referred to. And we actually came out of that group meeting with a series of recommendations that we actually all agreed to. The compulsory redundancy, reducing that from 100 to 25, came down from our very good friends opposite. We were happy to accept that. It was we'll accept that. you accept ours, and that's how it went. So this evening, to actually find that we're agreeing in a private meeting, but then when we come to council, actually, it's all bets off. Well, to be honest, that doesn't really make for good working relationships, and it's somewhat difficult. Let's just talk a little bit, especially for viewers at home. What are we talking in the Constitution? So it actually states, and I'm taking this from our Constitution, and if you're really that interested, it's 13.02b. And it changes to the Constitution, which in the opinion of the monitoring officer, the lady up there at the top left, do not, I'll repeat that, do not in any way affect the operation of executive arrangements, including overview and scrutiny, may be approved by the monitoring officer and brought into effect immediately or such a time as the monitoring officer shall determine, subject to A above. So what is A above? A is the process of the group leaders having a conversation, and we're saying, actually, those changes are so small, they're so minute, actually, we accept it, and we want to tick the box and move it on, change words here, the odd bits and pieces. If it's agreed by the group leaders, well, you know, we're saying, actually, that's really good to be able to move things forward. We had a position only a week ago that we actually all agreed that. A week later, we now don't agree that. It's really interesting, actually, because any new members sat around the table this evening, unfortunately, would not have the history of how this has been going on, and has really been a bit of a dogma for the partnership over the last 4 years, with an individual councillor who was there who wouldn't actually agree to this particular incident, and that's why it ran backwards and forwards. And so at the conversation a week ago, it was great. Guys, just bring it forward, because we've had so much aggro over it over the last 4 years. Let's just get it sorted. And it almost seems as though a week later, well, there's not much on the agenda, so let's just say we don't agree with it. And I just can't understand it, because the reality is, I agree, there's not much on the agenda this evening, but it ain't going to be like this every council meeting. There'll be masses as we go forward, as we start to uncover more and more. And do we want to spend 45 minutes? I don't know how long we'll spend on this particular item this evening, but do we want to spend 45 minutes of our community's time discussing whether it's the word the, and, but, or to? Is that what our residents really expect us to waste our time in this room discussing that? Surely they'll be saying, is there nobody on the top table who you can actually delegate that to? Have you not got faith in any of these people on the top table to do that piece of work for you? Are these officers not competent to do that? Well, I believe our officers are competent to do that. And we're absolutely supporting our officers. It's about a one-team approach in Torbay. And I really, really am disappointed. I am disappointed with the attitude that you've decided to take, with the particular nuances that you decide this evening to object around. So I would urge everybody to vote the amendment down. This absolutely will save...
30 seconds.
Thank you very much. And I was going to say, this will save eons of time, and it'll stop me talking for a further 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Cowell.
I once knew a trade unionist who was renowned for his understanding and knowledge of the Constitution and standing orders of just about every organisation he was involved in. And he always used to point out that constitutions and standing orders are there for a purpose. They're there to protect the organisation and its individual membership. This constitution belongs to the body of the council. Not the preserve of the officers, not the preserve of the cabinet or the leader or the leaders' groups. It's our constitution. And it's been evolved and developed over many, many years, and it's reflected changes, whether they be technical changes, which, from the previous speaker, you would think just suddenly happened. and that every one of those minute technical detail amendments to our constitution had to come before council. Not true. Smoke and mirrors. Dismiss it. Wipe it from your memory bank, because the vast majority, probably over 90% of constitutional amendments are technical amendments that are actually go through the senior officer group. They go through in consultation and to be made aware to the leaders of the group, so that then what we were doing, if there were amendments that were coming through that fundamentally changed the nuances of the constitution, then individual group members would be able to flag it up to the group leader, bring it back to the leaders group. If we couldn't agree, then it would come back to council. That reform last year seemed to me to work quite well. In fact, I'm not sure I can even remember an occasion that was implemented, because there was no constitutional amendment that was so technical or so controversial that we had to bring it to full council. I'm racking my brains. And I wonder, in actual fact, whether this attempt to reduce the amount of debate about whether it's our constitution or matters in terms of stifling debate around notice of motions on what could be national or international issues is a way to actually just reduce the amount of business at a council meeting, because some people want to get home early. And that's what it feels to me. You know, I take my responsibility as a councillor in Torbay extremely seriously, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many, many colleagues in that respect. So I don't think we should be neutering debate. I think, as Councillor Law pointed out in the speech read out by Councillor Fox, made it clear that adding our voice to some of those national local government association model motions actually is a way of demonstrating major influence, particularly at a time when local government nationally is in crisis because of the financial position that many local authorities find themselves in. We're lucky, because our children's services and our adult services aren't experiencing the huge levels of funding crisis that many other local authorities are. But if we've got issues about vaping, it could be about sewage outlets, it could be any other issue that only the government can influence, to stifle our debate, I think, is immoral. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cowell, I agree with a lot of what you've said. And so that I can put this into context for members in the room, in my capacity as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I sit on this same meeting of group leaders where this was discussed, this change, only a week or two ago. And the reason there was consensus around the table, well, members on the opposite side, some of you at the meeting may have totally different recollections than I, and some of you who are shaking your heads in disagreement, I would suggest you weren't there. I'm speaking as I found from a meeting I had the opportunity to attend. So this change was discussed. There was consensus from my perspective, from those present, because what was put forward was a mechanism for putting in changes to the Constitution where it would be brought to the attention of group leaders. Group leaders would presumably, well, this is what happens on this side of the chamber, they would ask the members of their group, they would then consult, they would present the group's opinion, and if that's also, and I'm sure it is, what happens on the other side of the chamber, there would be a process for taking forward changes to the Constitution that needed to happen, that made it more efficient, but perhaps didn't merit a long debate at a full council meeting, and that's what's here. This isn't a way of stifling debate, this is a way of providing a framework for decisions to happen in a more efficient form. Now, I agree, Councillor Cowell, with a lot of what you've said. It's really important that where there is disagreement, where there are controversial issues, those are brought forward to a full council meeting for them to be explored. This change, though, this doesn't prevent that. This just provides a mechanism for where there's consensus for that decision to be resolved, so that where there is concern, we've got longer to explore it and resolve it at a full council meeting like this. So whilst I agree with a large proportion of what you've said, I get to a totally different outcome. And indeed, I'd really understood from having been present at this leaders' meeting that there was that consensus. And so I can share Councillor Thomas as disappointment to find actually in the time since a different view's been reached. But if I might just encourage the meeting to reflect back, that's probably showing how groups work. Because what I might suggest to the meeting is that whilst the individual leaders present at that meeting found consensus, having gone and discussed the process with their groups might have reached a different conclusion, and that's why here today we're providing a different, we're hearing a different view put forward by the opposite side. Now, if that's what's occurred in relation to this agenda item, why can't that happen in relation to the changes to the Constitution that we're talking about going forward? And on that basis, I really struggle to understand why every single change, other than small, minor technical ones, has to be debated at a full council meeting. I simply don't understand why a discussion at a group level, reflecting that up through your group leader, I don't understand why on changes that are slightly more than technical, but maybe not substantive enough to warrant debate, why there's that concern. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Steve Darling.
Thank you. And I'm extremely concerned about two colleagues opposite who believe silence is consent. Is that the way you conduct your lives? That if somebody doesn't, you know, if somebody is silent with you, you assume that they agree with you? I'm just really worried about the way you conduct your lives if you believe silence is consent. Is agreement, is consent. But we as a local authority only a few months ago changed the way that we would manage constitutional changes, because as colleagues have said, the sovereign body isn't in smoke-filled rooms or virus-filled rooms with leaders. It's actually here, and I'm disappointed that colleagues have said we'll need the ifs and buts and maybes coming here for debate. We've already, you know, Councillor, the last speaker alluded to that would be picked up by officers under that delegated opportunity. But the reality is the sovereign group is the local authority. We did change that very recently. It hasn't been tested yet as a local authority, and yet we want to bin it straight away. I think that we should drive that and see how it goes, and if it doesn't work, then we can review it. But to bin it without testing it is peculiar indeed, and as my colleague said, a power grab by the administration. But then we shouldn't be surprised because they have chosen to, you know, not engage with us as we would have wished to on a number of different responsibilities with us as a local authority. And Mr. Mayor, if we have high aspirations for Torbay, you know, we need to be banging the drum and having a loud voice, working in partnership with other local authorities, and making sure that we're
this isn't relevant.
Punching ahead.
Councillor Darling, this isn't relevant. Can we...
Mr. Chairman, it is, because if we're not, Mr. Chairman, if we're not actually joining with others about issues like vaping, then we're failing to actually demonstrate what the concerns of our local communities are.
If you could bring your comment back to the original.
Yeah, I am, because this is about notice of motions that I'm on to now, and if we're unable to join with others about issues that concern us, then we can't. I was delighted, Mr. Chairman, when you accepted my urgent question in respect of ticket offices and the cynical closure that we're seeing of ticket offices under the Conservative government across the country in just a 3-week consultation. Because there was such a poor consultation result over that, it meant that I had missed the deadline for being able to do a notice of motion on this, so that we as a local authority could gang together and say, this is wrong-headed that this is happening under this Tory government. So I was delighted I was able to put it under an urgent question. But in future, we wouldn't be able to ask colleagues to take certain actions and demonstrate the level of opinion, because that would be out of our auspices. And yet, ironically enough, the actions from that urgent question that comes up later on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is exactly what we'd want to happen from a notice of motion, potentially, which is getting officers to feed back to the consultation and the council writing off to the minister around this. And yet, we will be robbing ourselves of giving that ability, and yet you're able to do it through an urgent question, which is rather bizarre. Colleagues, I am very concerned that we have seen the dead hand of conservatism on this constitution. This chamber is the sovereign body. It should remain so. We should test drive the latest proposals that came out only a few months ago. And colleagues, we should make sure that we continue to be the voice of our local communities through issues like notices of motion, whether that's on issues like vaping, sewage in our seas, or protecting our NHS. And we should, colleagues, don't let the Conservatives neuter and deny our communities their voice by effectively banning notice of motions as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Darling. Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we all voted as councillors, aren't we all here on behalf of our residents? Aren't we all supposed to be, as backbenchers, allowed to speak on behalf of our residents? Just think about it. I don't want to sit there gagged. I don't want to be bullied. To shut up and let the leaders, no offence, speak. I think we should all have a chance to speak. Freedom of speech, you know, all I want to say is think about it. I want to be heard. My residents want me to be heard. They want me to speak on local issues. And if I just have to speak to one person to speak on my behalf, am I really getting my voice across? I don't think so. And you can see how passionate I am about this. I think you need to vote for the amendment. You guys need your voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johns. I will hear from two more councillors on this particular amendment. First, Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just very briefly, the example that's been alluded to about vaping, unless I've fundamentally misunderstood this, we have the responsibility for public health, and we absolutely have the responsibility for the well-being of children. And when that motion came to the council, it was supported unanimously. So I think it's a bit of a red herring to say that we couldn't have discussions on vaping. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As I was also at that meeting, and Councillor Darling says that if you don't say anything, then you can't be in favour or you can't be against. We'll take that on board. Next time, we will make sure that we do ask you the question. We got a nod. We thought you were in favour. As far as Councillor Cowell is concerned, he gave a very passionate speech that, in fact, what we ought to have is any change in the Constitution coming to the leaders' group, for the leaders then to consult on it, to decide whether they are in favour or if they're not in favour. If they're not in favour, then it would go to full council. That's my understanding of what Councillor Cowell was saying, which is exactly what is in the changes here. So I cannot understand. The only thing I can think of is that you haven't read this, because it is there on page, I'll be helpful, page 49, 13.02a, which is worded virtually word for word what you said, Councillor Cowell. So I can't believe, having said that you would now vote against it. That's exactly what so I'm confused. I really am confused. I think you've either not read it or you're even more confused than I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Long, right to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I think that we must have been at different meetings. This group leaders meeting that has been held up for the viewers and the audience here as a kind of exemplar meeting. Councillor David Thomas is disappointed, and we're disappointed, so therefore it can't be working. And my experience of a meeting, just to give an example, I was unhappy about an item that was discussed at that meeting, but I thought I will go and sleep on it and discuss my concerns with other people, and I then decided to email Councillor Thomas afterwards. And I didn't get a reply, and in fact my email was ignored completely, and I had to jump up and down afterwards and speak to officers about it. So that's how that meeting operates from my perspective. So just because we didn't speak at the time does not equal consent, and from our experience, if we come back afterwards within 24 hours, it doesn't seem to make any difference. Our consent is deemed as given. There is a worrying trend that seems to be developing. Some colleagues here will have been in a very long overview and scrutiny meeting, and part of that was to talk about the work programme, and we spent at least 45 minutes discussing the work programme, and it was discovered that we couldn't influence anything because all the meetings were full. So we can't influence anything. And then, you know, scrutiny lead positions aren't shared out equally, outside body positions aren't shared out equally. That's our experience.
It's not relevant. Please.
I would disagree, but I'll take your ruling, but I would disagree. So that is our experience of not being able to engage with you even when we try. Please support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Timon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it a little strange that the Appendix 2, the review and revision of the Constitution, is being considered in this way. In fact, if either Councillor Steve Darling, or Councillor Cowell wish to do so, they could, from the next Constitution amendment that's brought to them, other than the very small technical ones, they could say, I want it to go to Council. Just as a matter of, that's their decision every single time. If that's what they want to do, yeah, that's what the wording here says they can do. If you want to do that, you can. You have the power to make every single one come back to Council. So it's no good, I think. I can't see that what we're talking about is the Conservative group in this regard, or the group leaders, well, certainly not this Conservative group, trying to get extra power. You've got the power as group leaders to say, I want everyone to come. But if this amendment were to go through, it would mean that if you felt it was appropriate, that it should be allowed to go through without going to debate in Council, you could do so. So we're not making anything, or we're not stopping anything coming to Council, if that is your choice. On the other matter, I think Councillor Bai has referred to the vaping, and I think that it is there that things that we can influence can still be brought as notices of motion and petitions, and in fact, as a council, we can influence a lot. The wording that we put forward here actually covers a group of activities or a group of possibilities where we could have no realistic chance of influencing them whatsoever. I think what we've written makes sense. I don't think it prevents much happening that you would want to happen of that regard. I leave it at that. I think what we put forward we thought was sensible, we thought was wise, and we thought would make for smoother running of the Council's constitution, and I stick by that.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. I now move to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Any against? So the amendment is lost. I now move to debate on the original motion. Councillor Timon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's all been said.
Councillor Thomas.
Likewise, happy to move to the vote.
Sorry, why hasn't Councillor Harvey been invited back to the meeting today? You have? Sorry, I was told that she wasn't. Thank you.
Okay, I now move to the vote on the original motion. All those in favour? All those against? Abstention?
One abstention.
Okay, motion carried. Seeing as we're now at 7:20, we are now going to take a 10-minute break.
Councillors will be reconvening very shortly. If you take your seats, please.
Everybody in place? Welcome back. I move to item 7, members' questions. The questions and answers have been circulated and are noted as submitted. Members, these are available on your iPads under the late reports pack. I have accepted an urgent question submitted by Councillor Steve Darling. I will ask for any supplementary questions for those members asking a supplementary question. It must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. I may remind members that supplementary questions shall not include a statement. I will be interrupting you if I consider your supplementary question is a statement. Please note that there is a time limit of 1 minute to ask a supplementary question. The response time for each supplementary question is 3 minutes, and the overall maximum time for members' questions is 30 minutes. I refer to the urgent question in respect of the consultation on the closure of rail ticket offices. Councillor Steve Darling, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. Mr. Leader of the Council, do you agree with me that a 3-week consultation is absolutely shameful on such a massive change to our infrastructure in our communities?
Thank you, Councillor Darling. I'd just like to talk to you about those last 3 weeks. So actually our MP, Kevin Foster, for those last 3 weeks has been running a campaign on the very issue that you actually raise. On this side of the chamber, we have written already to the Minister. We will be filling in the consultation paper on behalf, or at least our officers will be filling it in next week on behalf of the Council. Our rail enthusiast and local councillor, John Fellows, has had a petition in his shop running for 2 weeks. So delighted that you have now actually joined our local campaign. And maybe Councillor John Fellows would be happy to invite you to his shop in Torbay Road, where you can add your signature to the ever-growing petition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I refer to question 1 in respect of the public consultation for Oway Mansion and Gardens. Councillor Johns, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr Mayor. So, thank you, Councillor Lewis. So, in light of your reply, the consultation results will be coming out in August. Then can you please explain, on a Spotlight television report last Wednesday, it was announced that the mansion was going to be a health and well-being hub. I don't believe that was in the consultation. I hope you can explain.
Certainly can, Mr Mayor. If you read the consultation document, it speaks very clearly about the health hub, people walking around the grounds, playing tennis and other things. It's all an outside facility, which is clearly stated in the consultation paper. Thank you very much indeed, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I refer to question 2 in respect of Crossways. Councillor Barbara Lewis, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. Councillor Lewis, I've been campaigning for the last 8 years for a solution to Crossways. Do you think that the people of Paignton know the current situation that Crossways is in, please?
Thank you very much, Councillor Lewis Barbara. It's a difficult one, Crossways, and while we were out and about during the election and at other times, and in fact many of us probably got this through the letterbox. Bayview, Crossways, Bob the Builder. In case you haven't seen it, Bob the Builder, more Bob the Demolisher. Unfortunately, we have now learned that there's no end user for Crossways. I am really upset that after 4 years, 4 years to find a solution for Crossways, we're not back to square one, because I agree it has been demolished or is being demolished. But we will now have to desperately try and find a viable solution going forward. Most people that I speak to in Paignton and probably across the bay believe that when we took over in May, that you guys, the partnership, had actually found a solution and that the building will be demolished and extra care homes, social housing will be put on the site. The good people of Paignton and Torquay should know that that is not the case and has been left to us, the Conservative group, the administration, to find a solution. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I refer to question 3 in respect of the pavilion. Councillor Billings, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Lewis, for your answer. Could you please, going forwards, because in March 2021, under the previous administration, we were told the council was working as quickly as possible towards restoration of the pavilion, and not much has happened in the 2 years since. Can you ensure going forwards that we regularly update our residents on progress? And is there an end user currently in place, please?
Mr Mayor, there seems to be a theme in the other questions coming out on these questions. The pavilion, unfortunately, has no end user. Councillor Billings. I hear from opposite, although you shouldn't be shouting across the floor, that never had. No, you're right. You've had 4 years to find an end user for the pavilion. I've been saying at every meeting that before we do anything, we need to have a solution of what we're actually going to do with the pavilion. The leader of the council, myself, are having talks with major developers on the way forward for that site. And hopefully we will have good news within the next 12 months at the very latest. 12 months. We've waited over 4 years. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lewis. I refer to question 4 in respect of Edgenswell. Councillor Brooke, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes. Oh, gosh. Pardon me. Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Lewis, thank you very much for your answer on Edgenswell. However, fully understanding the difficulty of exact figures, are you in a position to give us an idea of the current estimate and the magnitude of the extra costs? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We are, in fact, talking to the government, the department. We're talking to Network Rail and others to try and get this across the line. Again, it's one of those ones that we picked up in May, where we then found that there's about £10 million shortfall on delivering this scheme. A scheme that we thought was ready to go, but unfortunately, we've now found out it's not ready to go. We've got to find £10 million. We're going to government, we're going to Network Rail. We hopefully will be able to get it across the line. But again, it's not one of those things that, well, I think enough said. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Councillor Lewis again. I refer to question 5 in respect of Old Way. Councillor Jackie Thomas, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have a supplementary. Thank you, Councillor Lewis, for your response. But can I ask you, please, where is the £30 million coming from? As this is an awfully lot of money to find. Do we have this much funding? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you'll see there is a bit of a theme coming through this. And anyone from the outside would probably think we were making it up. But we're not, actually. There is a 30 to 40 million black hole on Olway. And over the past 4 years, it has deteriorated day after day, week after week, month after month. It is going to be very difficult to find that 40 million. The only way we're going to do it, and we hope we will get help from the National Lottery. We have been told that there will be some funding, possibly up to £10 million, but 5 to 10 million. So we will have to find an extra, possibly £30 million to deliver Olway. As I've said over the past few months, when I found out that this black coal existed, we can't do it on our own. The only way that we're going to deliver Olway is to deliver it with partners. And that's what we're going to do, and hopefully we'll do it together. Olway should not be a political potato going backwards and forwards. Members can laugh on the other side, but after 4 years of doing nothing and being saddled with £40 million to renovate it, I would like to think that going forward we can do it together using the Olway Working Party, cross-party, to find a solution for Olway. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I refer to question 5 in respect... No, done that one, sorry. I refer to question 6 in respect of road markings. Councillor Strang, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Lewis, for your reply. I'd like to thank the Council for repainting of road markings on the Brixham Road. And we'd just like to ask if Brixham will benefit from its fair share of available funding for replacement markings going forward. I should also like to ask when the markings that have been started will be completed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you might imagine, Brixham is very dear to our hearts. And I'm sure that you will get the quota of line markings going across the bay. It is one of the things that when we took over, especially in certain wards where lines have faded, they couldn't be enforced, businesses were suffering because cars that were parked there for days on end couldn't be given a ticket because the lines were not suitable. When we took control in May, I did have a word. I got my old portfolio back. I see Mike Morey's gone. Thanks, Mike. One of the things that we did first off is to say, can we do this as quickly as possible? And luckily, we had the resources, we could do it. And many of you, and many of the public will see that a lot of the lines now have been renewed. A lot of the areas that couldn't be enforced can now be enforced. We can't do the whole bay, we can't do catch up for 4 years, but we will do our best. And I'm hoping that in October...
Can I sorry, Councillor Lewis, can I just say to all councillors, please show respect for the ones who are talking. We don't want to hear chuckling or chatting. Let's show respect, please.
So I hope, Mr Mayor, that come after the summer, we actually be able to roll it out across the Bay more. It's going to take time, but bear with us. We've made a start. We made a start within a few weeks of taking office, and that will continue. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I refer to question 7 in respect of terrace car park. Councillor Joyce, do you have a supplementary question?
I do indeed, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. This is in relation to the terrace hotel, the hotel authority on the terrace, in relation to it opening, hopefully, within the first quarter in 2024. I would like to ask, obviously, the people of Tormowen in particular, as well as Torbay, that the costing for this is roughly £600,000 per year of borrowing over a period of approximately 45 years. The people are really pleased, obviously, that to see it open, and then we can go some way to recoup the money that has been spent on this particular product. So thank you very much for that reassuring news that we will be getting the hotel open in 2024. Thank you.
The question was, I'm sorry, you were talking to Councillor Long, so you probably missed the question. So I won't repeat it. I agree with you that it is a disgrace that 600,000 a year, which could be spent on other things, is being spent on this year. I may live another 45, I may be a councillor for the next 45 years. Probably unlikely. The good people of Preston may decide that they want another candidate with, after 45 years. But we had the debate earlier. 600,000 is a lot of money. We offered our services. Many of the councillors probably won't know this. Sorry, in case you missed what I'm saying, Councillor Darling. Many of the people won't know this. When COVID came, we offered our services to help with investments, with developments like this. Our offer was not taken up. At that time, as we do now, we have a lot of people who were involved heavily involved in business and in property. And I think it's a great shame that that offer wasn't taken up, because if it was, we may not be in the position we are, where we're paying 600,000 every year for 45 years to have a Premier Inn. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Steve Darling.
Yes, I rise to make a personal point of explanation. I'm having to speak to Councillor Long for guidance of what the next answers are, because Councillor Lewis, you and your colleagues have failed to give...
Sorry, Councillor Darling, can I just hold you for 1 second?
Sorry?
Can I just hold you there for 1 second, please? We are not in debate, Councillor Steve Darling, so we are going to carry on with the questions.
Mr Chairman, I wanted to explain that because Councillor Lewis keeps on interrupting,
Councillor Darling,
Councillor
Darling,
it's to do with the questions,
Councillor Darling,
Mr.
we're
Chairman,
in questions.
due to my disability.
Councillor Darling, will you please sit down?
Mr Chairman, I need to explain something about my disability and why it's a challenge understanding the questions when it's not shared in advance of the meeting, and that's why I'm having to speak to Councillor Long, and then I've been named and called out for my disability. So I hope for an apology from Councillor Lewis, or does he show contempt in that way? Thank you.
Right, we're just going to move on to the next question. I refer to question 8 in respect of Torbay local plan. Councillor Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor David Thomas, for your answer to my question. Unlike vintage wine, local plans don't increase in value in age, and government policy, as set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, is absolutely clear that local plans must be kept up to date to do their job effectively, and to this end should be reviewed every 5 years. Just to remind members, and then I will get on to the question, just to remind members, our current local plan was adopted in December 2015. So basically it's right to address this issue. So my question, thank you for your patience there, my question, Mr. Mayor, is given the need for an update to date local plan to enable Torbay to meet its legitimate needs for development as sustainably as possible and to be as appeal-proof as possible, would you agree with me?
So, Councillor Fox, you're over your minute now.
Of my minute, just very briefly to say that I, for one, will be willing to work in partnership, as you've been sharing in this meeting, it's important we do, in any way deemed appropriate by the Leader of the Council and Director of Planning to help in the review of the local plan to enable it to be a sound document to serve all the residents, workers, visitors to Torbay the next 15 years.
Councillor
Thank you
Fox.
for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be honest, I didn't actually hear a question there, Mike, but I did hear a willingness to want to be able to work together and move forward. So I'll answer in the spirit of what you were talking about, no problem at all. So you are right that our local plan's 2016 to 2030, included in the local plan, and I don't need to tell you this is probably for everybody else, we have a five-year review mechanism in there, and you'll be aware that that first 5-year review mechanism kicked in 2021. And so, as an inspector, you could give me your own view of a simple, down and dirty review taking 2.5 years. I'll leave you to actually ponder on that one and whether you seem that that is actually feasible or not. But what we have seen and what we do know, we're going to be approaching the second review in 2026, and we won't have even had the first review underway. So we absolutely need to get that absolutely nailed. What we have seen in the first part of the phase, because in our local plan we've got something that is absolutely unique to Torbay, is a planning inspector welded economic growth, those jobs, to housing numbers, right? I can't find that in any other local plan across the country. I think that's what makes us unique. Certainly from the officers I've spoken to, they say that that's a unique position. But what we have seen mixed development sites coming forward for employment and for housing. And in reality, we haven't seen any of those employment sites delivered. The housing site comes forward, and you've got a strip of land down the front to be delivered as an employment site space. But the reality is, unless you actually put the money in up front for some B2 use or whatever, it's never going to be realistic. It's never going to stack up financially. And what happens is that kilter on our local plan will just get wider and wider. And so until we actually reallocate some dedicated employment sites to actually get them across the line, to get that balance in balance again, in equilibrium. That's what we absolutely need to do. So we do need to allocate some employment sites. As you know, there's a brand new NPPF coming through government. We need to see what that's going to do. There's also the brand new levelling up bill. So that's a new approach coming forward. We don't know what's going to we know what has been spoken about, but we don't know how the housing numbers will actually affect that and how that will play out. And you know that was due out for the summer. It looks as though it's now been pushed back to the autumn, which, you know, with the recess in place, that's disappointing, because we would have liked to have known where that is.
Councillor Thomas. That's your 3 minutes. I do apologise. It's 3
30
minutes.
seconds, no? Did I not? My apology. Sorry, if you gave me 30 seconds. Sorry, I'll sit down, sir.
I refer to question 9 in respect of the zebra crossing on Barton Road. In the absence of Councillor Councillor Mandy Darling, do you have a supplementary question?
I'm afraid we've got the wrong Darling identified. If I can, Mr. Chairman, I'll be speaking instead of Law on this occasion, if I may. Thank you. So, Councillor Lewis, do you guarantee that this will be in place by the time they go back in September? Yes or no?
Clearly, Mr. Mayor, I take safety very importantly. I noticed from the question that this has been going on for some time about the zebra crossing. You're trying to, for me to stand up here and promise that it's going to be done by September. You've had months to do this. We haven't. As I said to you, Mr. Mayor, I take safety very seriously, as our team does, and this crossing will be in place as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I refer to question 10 in respect of cost of living support. Councillor Steve Darling, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I will forego my supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you. I refer to question 11 in respect of Preston Down Road. Councillor Swithin Long, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. And my supplementary is that does the Leader of the Council agree with me that given the housing crisis and the costs of temporary accommodation, does the administration plan to have at least 50% affordable housing on Preston Down Road as the previous administration envisaged?
I'm more than happy to answer your question, although it is somewhat spurious from the one that you actually submitted. So housing crisis, temporary accommodation is really, really important. And I think, as we've already highlighted previously, the piece of land at Preston Down Road, we've only got a few what could be very expensive pieces of land. And we believe that we absolutely need to sweat those assets as much as we possibly can, because one thing is for certain, if we had, I don't know, let's just pick some figures out of the air, literally. So if we had £2 million allocated to social housing on that particular site, it would provide, I don't know, let's say 30 units. If we take that money and put it into potentially another scheme, maybe Crossways, that we know that's got a £10 million black hole, potentially, if that then buys us more affordable houses in that particular scheme, potentially double, I don't know, because we haven't got those figures. I'm just literally just pulling them out of the air, but I'm just trying to explain the ethos of why we would want to do it. Then we actually, I've said this already this evening, we actually provide a bigger bang for our buck for our residents, because that way round, instead of providing a limited amount of affordable housing on that one site at Preston Down Road, by taking the money from that site and allocating that somewhere else, we can actually create much more space. We spoke earlier, and in fact your amendment this evening revolves around temporary accommodation. So we absolutely understand temporary accommodation is an issue today. It's going to be an issue, at the end of the year. It's not going to disappear. It really isn't going to disappear. But if we can provide much more temporary accommodation by using that money in a much smarter way, that's the way that we want to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I refer to question 12 in respect of Premier Resort Fund. Councillor George Darling, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Thomas, for your response. No supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you. I now refer to question 13 in respect of the pedestrian footbridge. Councillor Mandy Darling, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I now refer to question 14 in respect of antisocial behaviour in St Mary Church. Councillor Harvey, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Tranter. Could you advise us what support as a council we are offering Devon and Cornwall Police to deliver their...
Please stand.
Sorry. Could you please advise what support we are offering Devon and Cornwall Police to assist them in delivering their objectives? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think some of these questions, the part of the question that you've asked is for the police really. We know that antisocial behaviour is on the rise. We know we want to work more closely with the police and develop better working relationships. And yes, that's it. We just want to start working closely together.
Thank you. I now refer to question 15 in respect of illegal encampments. Councillor Penny, do you have an...
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank Councillor Trans for a very solid response. Very good. But for sake of clarity, for residents, traders and so forth, visitors in our area, you refer here to discussions with the police. In those discussions, did the council and the police agree that if such future incidents occur in the future, you will be applying the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, which widens and clarifies the powers available, and in which case you could give us all an assurance that such incidents will be cleared within a matter of hours, not of days nor of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Penny. We continue to work tirelessly with the council directors and officers for a solution. We've already been, as we've told you, to joint workshop with police with regards to certain acts, we are working really closely with being able to provide a better, quicker response, because we know this situation is not good for residents. They're really unhappy with it. A lot of the time are in my ward. I get the phone calls. I'm very keen to get this situation sorted. I've been a councillor for 11 weeks and I've had many, many meetings, many phone calls with constituents, and I can assure you we are working on getting better, quicker resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor Tranter. Due to the fact we've used up our half an hour, our 30 minutes, I'd like to pass over to...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can confirm that now the 30 minutes is up as the time allocated to questions, and therefore all remaining questions will be classed as withdrawn in accordance with Standing Order A12.7. Members can resubmit their questions to a following council meeting as one of their 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank members for your attendance today. The meeting is now closed.